Welcome everybody to the audit do I need to move across? Are we live on the internet? Yeah, okay. Yeah, welcome to the first meeting of the audit and accounts in the new committee room. We're summoned here because we've got some decisions to make, and thus under the regulations we can't have Zoom meetings if we're making decisions. Okay, I need to read the usual piece for a live meeting. Pick up. Do I get paid for having this? Is like the Euros, isn't it? I'm gonna. Okay. Right, the fire evacuation procedures for this meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go along the corridor and meet in the War Memorial Park. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. The webcast will also be published to YouTube after the meeting. On mobile phones, please can all members and public switch their phones off as opposed to silent, so we can't be pinged and have to leave the meeting to isolate. Okay. Apologies for absence and substitutions. We have two. We've got apologies have been received from Councillor Holland, and Councillor Miller is replaced by Councillor Cochetta. And welcome to the new members of the committee this evening. Good to see you. Okay. Welcome back, old members of the committee. It's good to see them as well. I'm sure it is. Yeah. Any declarations of interest in the subject matter this evening? Nope. Any urgent matters? Nope. So on to the minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting. Do we take them as an accurate reflection of that which occurred? Okay. Yeah. I'll sign them at the end. Okay, so on to the subject matter of this meeting. We've got no finance tonight. It's basically all audit, and it's all shall we say heavy stuff that's governed very much by legislation and doesn't give us a great deal of room. So the first item 5, is the annual governance statement for 2020-2021. Fiona, would you like to say a few words?
I will, thank you, Chairman. Just by way of introduction, especially for those members who are new to this committee, items 5 and 6 really go hand in hand. The local code of corporate governance, which we'll come on to in item 6, is a public statement of the ways in which the council will achieve good corporate governance, and this is based on sit for solace principles, core principles of good governance. And the annual governance statement, which is the matter we're dealing with first, is prepared following a review of the evidence available to the council in seeking compliance with the code, the local code. So it provides assurances to the in-year operation of the risk and governance arrangements adopted by the council. The annual governance statement is a requirement of the Audit and Account Regulations 2015, and it requires all local authorities to review at least once a year the effectiveness of its system of internal control. It's prepared in accordance with the timetable for the preparation of the financial statements, and the draft annual governance statement is currently forms part of the council's draft accounts. It's a review of the governance arrangements, what's in place, and at the end of the statement you'll see it identifies areas where improvement is required or suggested. So the statement is fairly straightforward. It goes through each of the core principles and sets out the evidence we say means that those principles are met. And at the end of the report of the statement, in paragraph 5, it outlines those areas which we think need further work this year. So just as a reminder, for last year, the areas that were covered in this section of the statement were the review of the Constitution. There have been some minor amendments over the last year, but we're now, as you're aware, going to start a more fundamental review this current year. Last year, there was an action for cyber security review of arrangements, which has taken place, and is obviously the nature of the beast is that's an ongoing review. There was the council recovery plan from COVID-19 and the financial recovery plan, which are both really sort of carried forward into the areas we've identified for this year. So just to go through those, as I've said, there's the review of the Constitution, there's the Economic Recovery Framework and Action Plan, which has been approved by Cabinet in October last year, which will be reviewed. There's the Financial Management Code. We're undertaking a procurement and contract review, and an outstanding matter which didn't take place last year due to the resources not being there at the time is the Partnership Governance Framework Review. So those are the items we've identified. Otherwise, we'd ask the committee to approve the draft AGS, and subject to your approval, it will then go on to the Chief Executive and the leader for them to sign it off. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Fiona. Are there any questions? I think Councillor McCormick just got there before you, Councillor James.
Oh, 6:04. Thank you, Chair. Page 21, section C, defining outcomes in terms of sustainable economic, social and environmental benefits. There's 5 key priorities that are set out there that link into the council plan and various other documents. How do we measure, do we have any key performance indicators to see how well we're doing in those plans? How and who decides if we're making progress and making sufficient progress on them or not?
Thank you. I think Sue was suggesting.
Sue.
Obviously as part of the council budget papers approved in February, council approved the priority plans which link to each one of these priorities. Within there are the actions that are being undertaken to help meet those priorities along with the measurements. Those measurements now form part of the performance monitoring that will go to performance panel as a sub panel of scrutiny, and that will so obviously those indicators have been approved by council. So they're obviously suggested by officers, approved by council, but they are live documents. So at scrutiny last week there was some discussion around how some of those indicators could be improved, and they will be picked up through the performance panel, and obviously ongoing monitoring will be published in the public eye.
Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, thank you for that. A couple of supplementals, if I may. The first is what public input is there? If there's key priorities for the council, really we should be looking at some kind of public input. Are we succeeding or failing in the eyes of our residents? So, and the other one is there any scope to include it in the list of governance issues on pages 28 and 29? Should we have reason to believe that we're failing to meet our key priorities and meeting our residents' expectations? And to give one example, bullet point 1 there, strengthen communities by delivering high quality services, supporting local communities, providing outstanding leisure, sport and culture, improving health and well-being and being accessible and inclusive. There are several groups of people in the members of the public who would have issues with that, not least the football club, the ice users and the ice rink, and the Haymarket and Anvil. Some of the things that have happened recently, members of the public won't be able to square providing outstanding leisure, sport and culture with cutting the Anvil Trust grants by 50%, or the lack of progress we've had with the ice rink over the last 3 years, or indeed the lack of progress in the last year and a half with the football club. So I would very much want to see some means of incorporating public feedback into measuring our governance.
Yep. So,
So in terms of, is it an appropriate thing to put in the annual governance statement? I think that probably needs further discussion. Obviously, we have a performance monitoring framework already, and there's ample opportunity for members to feed into that and challenge it on behalf of their wards. We obviously not last year, the year before we had the resident survey. So we do periodically do resident surveys to understand how they feel about the services they're providing. I don't think that's necessarily linked to the fact that we have an appropriate governance process in place to monitor the indicators that have been set by council. So what I would suggest is that obviously these are all going to be published, whereas in the past they haven't been published. So the priority plans are the first stage in that, allowing members of the public to see what those indicators are. And obviously they will get the quarterly results of those as well and have an opportunity to feedback through yourselves as well in terms of that monitoring.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. And the first question builds on what Andy's just said in relation to Anvil Arts budget. B on page 20, ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement is obviously one of the following paragraphs demonstrate how we've ensured openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. Members who are here, and for the benefit of those who weren't, will remember that, well, know that the budget goes through a process. It goes through a committee. The draft budget goes out to consultation, having gone through a committee and having gone through cabinet. The consultation takes place. The responses are looked at. It then goes back through scrutiny, and it goes back through cabinet, and it goes to full council for debate. And that happened like it does every year with the budget for this year. At no point in any of those things was it mentioned Anvil Arts and the substantial cut that we made to their budget. It was saved until 2 weeks after full council had voted through the budget and after the last opportunity to make any amendments. And none of the amendments included it because it hadn't been mentioned in the budget papers anywhere. And then council announced a massive cut, or cabinet announced a large cut to the Anvil Arts at short notice, just as we go into Purda. I'm not sure how that's, and it came as a big shock to opposition councillors, a big shock to the Anvil Arts, a big shock to everybody. Now, there should never be shocks if you're ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. So I'd like to understand how it happened and why it's not reflected in here as a real challenge, something we need to get better at. Discuss.
Yep. Well, I think in some ways that's a very similar point to Councillor McCormick's. I don't know if you want to comment, Sue, but there's a difference between the government statement and then how we monitor it, how we report it, how we bring back, and how it goes through the other processes that you defined in terms of
in
council.
due respect, Chair, this is a report describing how we achieved last year to be compliant with our own rules, and gives evidence in section B is about ensuring openness, comprehensive stakeholder engagement. So we found some evidence that we do it, but there's also not a lot of evidence that we don't do it. 180 Culver Road. It was a short decision made at Cabinet about changing the use of a building with a substantial difference it would make to residents who lived in the area. Didn't go through any committees, no pre-scrutiny. It went through a Cabinet decision, a tiny decision, not cross-party. So there's lots of evidence of things that aren't transparent, aren't open, and don't have any stakeholder involvement. And that's a concern. And I'm just worried that we're going to present a report to our governance report for the year is saying we are very good at this kind of thing, and we are in many areas, but it's not highlighting the fact that actually we get some things wrong. And I think that is something. But anyway, if that's, you know, I raise that. If I go on to section C, on page 22, right at the bottom, the second to last paragraph on section C says, this was presented to the Planning and Housing Committee on the 3rd of September 2020 for their comment and approved by Cabinet on the 6th of October 2021. Now, I know that Cabinet is a bit of a show. It's just there for show, and it's probably got a script lined up in advance. But I think that should be October 2020, because I don't think we can possibly say what Cabinet are going to do in October this year. although we probably do know what they're doing in October this year. It's probably been written now by officers for them. But that's, I'll point it out to you. Page 22. It's an error. Yeah. And it's always ahead of themselves. So probably U-turn by then. The other thing on the next paragraph, it says the council also engages frequently and proactively with government in representing local residents, businesses and stakeholders, needs through consultation responses informed by horizon scanning and policy analysis, takes place in a wide range of themes and local government funding. And it continues. There was no evidence. In all the other bits, we've got a specific piece of evidence. Hey, we managed to get this. We achieved this. That bit, it's kind of a nice wishy-washy statement, but we haven't got such as the extra X amount of money that we got from the government to do Y. And I just think it'd be good to have evidence in that report to support it, because otherwise, it doesn't sound entirely believable. And on section D, determining the interventions necessary to optimise the achievement and of the intended outcomes. Going on to page 23, it says the scrutiny committees have power to call in executive decisions, agree a scrutiny programme and monitor performance and budgets. Scrutiny provides the role of a critical friend to decision makers and assists with policy development. Most of us were there at the last full council meeting where the opposition asked for scrutiny of how fly tipping is dealt with and managed within the borough. Now, you'd think either we are doing everything right, in which case the administration would have supported it, or we think we're doing everything right, but there's lots of new councillors, possibly with new ideas, it's worth airing that because we want to constantly improve, in which case they'd support it. Or actually there's stuff we're not doing right, that we didn't replace staff, that we've had staff shortages, that perhaps we're running the budget down, and actually if someone scratches below the surface, they might find that, in which case we'll vote against scrutiny of it. And indeed, the administration voted against scrutinising that particular topic, which would indicate, although we have some level of pre-decision scrutiny, and admittedly, I'm sure the chair of scrutiny will just ask to look at it at a later date, actually is our scrutiny, if the tyranny of the majority is a frightening thing in democracy, and if scrutiny can be stopped, then I think it's very scary. And perhaps we're looking at the Constitution anyway, maybe our annual report should reflect the fact that actually, whilst we have some good scrutiny processes around pre-scrutiny, there is evidence to suggest we need to tighten up the process for scrutiny, which we know anyway, but let's put it in the report, let's be honest, and say it's a failing. Could that be added?
Sue, would you like to comment on it?
Sorry.
I think that's absolutely fine. Where we talk about the review of the Constitution, we can add something saying including a review of the scrutiny process.
Yeah, although it's not for this committee, I think if scrutiny want to do a paper on fly tipping, then that's for the scrutiny. They can override that particular thing. Okay, we okay with Councillor Putty? Yeah.
Let's not go. I've got one more. You got one more. Why don't you finish that and then? Well, I thought we've gone too fast. Under F, managing risk and performance through robust internal control and strong public financial management. It mentions in there key projects such as Manydown have additional governance arrangements, the projects to deliver, and it goes on about Manydown. And there's no doubting, I think we do have a robust thing in place to manage the Manydown project. But it says key projects such as Manydown. Thinking of the other examples of big projects, you've got the leisure park. I'm not sure of any governance arrangements. I'm not sure the ice rig's been through a few committees, and I appreciate some confidentiality about the discussions that happen with that because of where we are. But I don't remember the leisure park wholly going before any committee to look at where we are. Bear in mind that we're now 8 years into a 6-year programme. And Basing View, when's the last time that went before a committee? Where's the robust processes in place to have oversight of how Basing View is going? How's the relationship with Muse? Is that working? Is it not working? How do we react now after the pandemic? So I think, again, there's something wrong in there. We talk about Manydown because that's the good one, but actually we need to be honest with ourselves. Because unless I'm missing these meetings, where is the robust oversight of other big projects such as the leisure park and Basing View?
Sue.
In terms of Basing View, obviously there is a steering committee, which is a subcommittee, I believe, of Cabinet. Is that right? So there is a public meeting that discusses Basing View. The leisure park, obviously all of these major projects have programme boards, and as and when a key decision comes forward, they will go through the appropriate process. With the leisure park, there hasn't been anything to report on per se in terms of decision making. However, it is reported through the corporate programme board, through to cabinet briefing and through to performance panel. So there is in terms of the governance, in terms of what's actually happening, that is being reported. It's in terms of decision making, as far as I'm aware, unless Fiona knows otherwise, there hasn't been any decisions brought forward to be made.
And just can you confirm for me that in relation to the Basingview Steering Committee, which is a subcommittee of Cabinet, how many parties are represented on that?
It's the cabinet members, 3 cabinet members.
Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, following from that page 25, managing risk and performance through internal control and strong public financial management. We have got shared services with Hart, Rushmore, Borough Council, Winchester Council. And it's mainly my concern is regarding the cyber security issues that we have. We have got here that the internal audit employ ethical hackers to test the council IT system. Ethical hackers, I am at a loss here. I just wanted to know who are these hackers who are testing our system, and given that we have got 3 other council as partners, so how do we really maintain the risk?
Councillor McCormick.
White hat hackers are a well-known term in the industry where you get people to try and crack your systems. You can't, if you're trying to manage a system, if you're an IT manager, you can't guarantee a system secure until you get somebody else to try and hack it. So there are people and companies that do that, white hat hackers. And there is a protocol where if they find a vulnerability, they will let the people know who are responsible and give them a certain amount of time before they publish what that particular vulnerability is. Because at a certain point in time, somebody else might discover it. So the whole purpose of it is to try and expose vulnerabilities and get them fixed before the Russians or the Chinese get hold of them.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. But obviously, none of our results are published. They are for internal use only. But this is also, and some of you were on the name and shame list. I'm not saying who, but obviously we send out scam emails as well to see who responds to them, who opens the links, and it helps us to give people a good reminder of, please don't open these types of emails. Please don't open links. This is how people get viruses onto our system. So it's quite a wide thing, but it's done through Paul Gundry, through the internal audit process, and we have a specific individual that comes on site and is able, and we allow them to effectively send something to you all and see what you do with it. And that actually helps us to kind of redo the training, identify key areas, and obviously inform people and remind them. Last year there was a really good one. I have to say it was a good one. It was completely COVID related. Everybody was a little bit sensitive in terms of what they should be doing. Should I click on this link or not? And lots of people in normal circumstances probably wouldn't have done, but it was a really good test. And actually a lot of people opened it, even though it had a really random email address. It was spelt wrong, but because it was COVID and people were really focused on it, people opened it. So it was just a helpful reminder to be able to send information back out to people to say, don't forget, even in these really trying times, these are the things you need to be vigilant about. So that's what they do, but obviously they're employed by the council to do this, and it's just for internal uses, and it's just for us to identify any weaknesses that we may have.
Right.
Just to add, what backup system have we got, especially with the cyber security and with the IT system that we have got? And if anything really goes wrong, as you're saying, what with the pandemic and so on, but if anything goes wrong, how do we really, have we got just one system or have we got a backup system?
So obviously we have a data recovery process as well, so we do actually have additional servers and obviously a copy of our information at a certain point in time. so we can recover to a certain point. So we are covered, and obviously a lot of our systems are now moving to the cloud, and therefore actually we don't hold them on servers per se. They are held for us off premises.
Okay, there's been quite a number of points minuted regarding more about the performance of some of the government issues, and we're asked to approve this draft annual government statement. Are we as a committee happy to do that? Agreed? Yep. Okay. On to item 6, the local code of corporate governance. And as with item 5, we're asked to approve that. Fiona, would you like to make comments?
Very briefly, Chairman. This is obviously following on from the last item, and a review of the local code of corporate governance has taken place. It really is it hasn't changed very much from the one presented last year. I should point out the obvious error I've made at the page of top of page 37, where the year says 2020-21 and it should be 21-22. The bulk of the code is setting out the SIPFA principles and sub-principles of good governance, and then at pages 56 to 58 it's a table demonstrating the evidence of compliance with the local code. So our committee is asked to approve this version of it. Thank you.
Are there any comments, questions, or are we happy to approve this?
Happy to approve it, Chairman. Just one comment, Chairman. Thank you. I think it's very useful, and now I know it's there, I can be testing everything that the Conservatives do over the next 12 months against it, and look forward to doing so. Can I have a laminated copy?
Thank you for your input, Councillor James. Thank you. Okay, that's approved then, everyone?
Yeah, happy to approve, Chairman.
So we're on to item 7, RIPA, and we have the original report that was issued and then a supplementary which tracked the changes, because this has been updated in accordance with the COVID and changes in legislation, etc., because this is very tightly governed by law. Fiona, are you covering this one as well?
I am. Thank you, Chairman. For those, again, who are not familiar due to being new members on this committee, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, which I think is quite unfortunately shortened to RIPA, is a piece of legislation which regulates the use of covert surveillance by public bodies. So, for example, some councils might use hidden cameras to catch persistent fly tippers. If the cameras are hidden and there's no sign saying there are cameras, that local authority would have to comply with the Act and would need a court approval to put those hidden cameras in place. The repercussions of not complying are that any evidence which you might have gleaned from those cameras may not be might be challenged in court proceedings, and you have potential infringements of human rights, those consequences as well. So a council can only use directed surveillance where you have an offence, you're preventing or detecting criminal offences, and where there's a maximum term of at least 6 months imprisonment to that offence. If it's less than that, then you can't use these powers for directed surveillance. Use of the powers is contentious because of allegations of council spying or the Snoopers Charter, hence why there is oversight by this committee. So this report is both the annual report and the review of the policy. I should say the annual report indicates that there's been no RIPA authorities over the last year. Indeed, there haven't been any since 2009. We were inspected by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office on the 22nd of April. He reviewed all our policies and guidance, and he undertook an interview with myself. There was generally very positive feedback, and overall he was impressed by the measures in place. He did, however, make some recommendations to improve the policy, which are set out in the track changes and referred to in paragraphs 3.6.2. The main changes he was recommending was to the paragraphs on the use of social networking sites to give sort of more practical examples rather than just quoting the code of guidance, which we had done until then. There were some changes to the just sort of clarifications on the use of juvenile chises, which is a covert human intelligence source. Again, we do not use these, so it really is academic, but it needs to be in the policy just in case something were to arise. And he also wanted us in paragraph 10.3 to emphasise that any authorisations have to be actually positively cancelled. They can't just be allowed to lapse. There has to be a thought process that goes through to the cancellations of those authorisations. So it's council asking committee to note the report, but also to approve the revised RIPA policy.
Just one question. 4.5, I still think that reads incorrectly. It should be minimum, not maximum. That's on page 71. Or page 9 of the revised.
I think it is correct, Chairman. It's
I thought it was a minimum of a 6 months jail sentence.
You can't have a maximum
term.
at least.
No,
That's 6 months.
that's how it's worded in the guidance. Yes. No, you're right. I shall change the wording again. I'll change the wording.
Okay. Right. Councillor Putty.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask, because since the RIPA has been set for this council, authorising officers have to really let the process really carry on. But what evidence do the authorising officers need before and the time scale for them to really authorise covert surveillance or
Well, there is, I should say, there is quite a detailed form to complete, but in essence, it is a last resort. When any other investigatory techniques have failed, they have to show that it meets the sentence required to allow us to use the authority in the first place. But what's most important is it has to be proportionate and necessary. The use of covert surveillance has to be proportionate, and as I say, it has to be a last resort. So you're looking at whatever else has been tried and how significant a criminal offence there may have been committed to decide whether it is actually you go to this rather quite draconian step of putting hidden cameras or you're using some sort of covert surveillance.
Because Fiona, this is not to be confused with the review of social networking sites that we have reported to Audit on a quarterly basis. This is RIPA for the serious stuff.
Yes, Chairman, this is the serious criminal offences, yeah.
Okay, are we happy to approve the revised? Oh, sorry, Councillor McCormick.
I have to ask, you mentioned that we hadn't used these powers since 2009. Why is that? Do we not suspect anyone of doing anything wrong?
I think they use other techniques. So usually, if it's for this council, the type of criminal offences you'd use them for would be fly tipping, in essence. And for fly tipping, you'd put overt cameras out. If you were going to use any sort of CCTV, you'd have a camera and you'd have a big sign saying you're being watched. So that's not actually caught by these rules. That would be what most councils would do nowadays, I think.
I understand we've got mobile cameras for fly tipping. So are they always used in conjunction with signs, or are they just placed there, in which case they might be covered under the rules?
Well, they should have signs on them because we're not getting any authorisations, but I don't know the detail of that, I'm afraid. I've not been involved in it.
Okay, any other comments, or will we approve the draft, the amended policy?
We
Agreed.
approve it, yes.
Right, thank you. So, that then takes us on to, where are we? Item 8, the work programme. There's 3 items for the next meeting at the end of September, but they're all chunky items, so there'll be the audit progress report, the risk register, and the statement of accounts. Sorry? Oh gosh, I didn't turn the page over. Do forgive me. Oh dear, that could be a long one.
They didn't show you this when you were Mr. Chairman, did they?
Yeah. Summary of investment income Q1, that would be very interesting. Treasury management Q1, and the audit results report. That's the external audit of 2021, which, will that be done in time for that? Oh, good. Okay, that's the next meeting, 27th of September. Okay. Right. We don't need item number 9, exclusion of press and public. So I do believe that brings us to the end of the meeting.
Excellent job, Chair. We haven't been long